Hey guys, welcome to the video. Salt here. Today I'll be going over the secondary, the Tenet Cycron. The Tenet Cycron was the first ever weapon video I ever did about 2 years ago and over 300 videos ago. So I think it finally deserves a redo, especially after we've gotten so many updates that improve weapons or add mods and arcanes. But before we go over the build, let's go over the first and top commenter boards. So the first commenter of the last video was Shaquem Simmons, 7362, and the top commenter of the last video was Empyrean. And we have our recent channel supporters here of Nice Bear, Colonel Suro 6, and Alfofo. Thank you so much for your support. Unique and interesting things about the Tenet Cycron is that it has innate heat, it has innate 1 meter punch through. This is also a beam weapon that will chain its beam from your targeted enemy to 2 additional enemies within 7 meters for 60% of the main beam's damage. This is also a battery style weapon, so it doesn't use ammo normally, it just needs a second or so to charge. And another unique thing to Lich type weapons in general is that you can get to choose another element the weapon gets called a progenitor element. And for our build, we'll be picking a magnetic progenitor. Magnetic will help us to scale into higher level enemies easier. There was a good bit of testing required for this weapon, mainly because its base critical chance is 20%, which is really close to being right in between where you'd use either the secondary arcane Enervate, or you would go with a standard critical chance build with galvanized crosshairs and creeping bullseye. But on testing, Enervate produced more orange crits than the critical chance mod setup, and it also saved us 1 mod slot compared to the other setup. And so Enervate was the clear winner here. Another thing I want to mention, because I usually will not use galvanized shot on weapons that are not multiplicative gun CO, but there are some instances where you'd still use it, and this weapon is a good example. So there's a few reasons for this. 1, we're not going for an arcane that gives us a huge amount of flat damage. So we're using Hornet Strike for 220 flat. 220 is not bad, but Galvanized Shot will help Hornet Strike feel like we almost have Cascadia Flare on without actually having to use Cascadia Flare. The number 2 is that this is a fast firing weapon, and so you do end up scaling up to 360% flat on each enemy very quickly with Galvanized Shot. And number 3, the 80% status chance is very useful since one of our elements, heat, doesn't have a cap. So the more we can produce, the better. So again, this is a good example of a weapon that doesn't have multiplicative gun CO, where you'd still want to use Galvanized Shot. Okay, let's go over the mods. Galvanized Diffusion for multi-shot, Galvanized Shot for status chance and flat damage, Hornet Strike for flat damage. Now, Hornet Strike is the weakest slot on this build, so this is where you'd put a Riven if you have a Riven. Lethal Torrent for fire rate and multi-shot, Prime Target Cracker for critical damage. Remember, we're not using any critical chance mods because our arcane will be taking care of that. In the next 2 slots, we're going to be using the 60/60 Toxic and the 60/60 Cold mods to make Viral. And in the next slot, we use Primed Heated Charge to overweight our heat stat so that most of our procs are heat. And if we look at our stat weighting here, you can see heat is very well weighted over the other statuses. In the Exilis slot, we use Ruinous Extension to increase our beam range from 28 meters to 36 meters. And in the Arcane slot, we're going to be using Secondary Enervate to give us our critical chance. This is how you build out the Tenet Cycron. I hope you guys liked it, and if you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing for future content. So now we have a 5-minute gameplay portion showcasing the weapon on Steel Path Lewis Hercules. And when that's done, I'll give the Tenet Cycron its final score and ranking. So I'll see you guys again after the gameplay. All right, let's start this 5-minute gameplay portion up. Show how the Tenet Cycron works. I really like this weapon. Most people are going to compare this to the Kuva Nukor or the kit gun, the Gaze. And those are both fair comparisons. I think in general, the Kuva Nukor will be better than both the Gaze kit gun and the Cycron. but I think there are situations where the Cycron or the Gaze kit gun can beat the Nucor. Obviously, the Nucor is not a battery weapon, so, you know, if you're using the Nucor as your main damage source, there are times where you might, depending on like the enemy density and whatnot, you might have ammo issues. And, you know, the Cycron will never have issues like that. So maybe you have like an EDA or an ETA that has some kind of ammo modifier that, like, you know, makes you pick up less ammo. The Tenet Cycron would be a lot better than the Nucor there. Of course, EDA and ETA can't always pick what you want to use, but it's just something to consider. And the Gaze, the secondary kit gun, the Gaze, that is also comparative to these two weapons. That's very unique. I think most of the time the Cycron and the Nucor will beat the Gaze out. But what the Gaze does is extremely unique, and the Cycron and the Nucor can't do it. So in those weird situations, the Gaze would beat those out. So I think all three of those weapons, even though they're very similar, I think they have their own, you know, positives and negatives. I don't think there's one that always beats the others. Again, I think in general, if you just, like, you know, look at instances, I think 9 out of 10 times the Nucor will win, but there are going to be instances where the other two win. The other cool thing about the magnetic progenitor is that it's not really coming into effect right now because we're starter steel path where there's not really any Eximuses yet. But once you start getting Eximuses, a lot of times, you know, you will have 4 elements, because that magnetic will also turn into electric on those bigger dudes. So your 360 flat from galvanized shot turns into 480 flat, which is quite nice. And that's why Hornet Strike is your weakest mod on the build. So that's easily your ribbon slot. I still like Hornet Strike though. Like, if you don't have a ribbon, I think Hornet Strike is nice there, because Hornet Strike is not a conditional. It doesn't need to ramp up to be good. It's good right off the bat. So like without Hornet Strike, initially, like your first 1 second of shooting at an enemy is going to feel kind of bad until like you get your procs on target, and then it's going to feel really good, like you wouldn't even need Hornet Strike. But with Hornet Strike, it feels good all the time. Oh, here we go, here we go. So we got the Acolyte here, and we're going to see it's single target against dudes that can only stack statuses to 4. And you're going to notice it's really, really bad. Not good at all against Acolytes. Now, that's not to say it's not good in single target, but specifically dudes that can only stack statuses to 4, like the Acolytes. I think Void Angels can only stack to 4. Anything that can only stack to 4, this is pretty garbage tier. Regular dudes, though, where you can get, like, you know, hundreds of heat procs on them, it's good. It's really good for single target. You know, getting 300-400 heat procs on a target's really good. So we'll take care of violence here, and then we're going to have Thraxus coming. All right, we got to get you down. We got to get you down, Violence. I want to get you down before Thraxus come. You know, of course, you don't have to use the Tenet Cycron to kill Acolytes. I'm just showcasing what this does against everything. You know, ideally, you would use your Tenet Cycron to kill trash, and you would, like, switch to your melee to kill Acolytes. I just like to give a whole showcase on what the weapon feels like against everything.
Extraction is ready. These manifestations, they
You know, against these Thraxes though, really good because you can stack, you know, past 4 on Thraxes. So like, you know, as far as single target goes on Thraxes, really nice. Look at this guy. I think it was like almost 100 heat procs before he went down. So that's the 5 minutes there. Let's see, we're at 454. That would put us on track for 900 kills in 10 minutes. So we'll end it here and we'll go back to the orbiter there. Welcome back. So let's go over how the Tenet Cycron did in its 3 10-minute runs on Steel Path Lewis Circulus. It got 1,002, 1,023, and 855 kills in its 10 minutes, putting it in the S tier for kill per minute potential. I really didn't like the one outlier score of 855. I don't like when my scores are over 100 kills different than the others. That usually means that the tile set I was farming on was either way better or way worse than the other runs. But since all 3 scores still average over 900 kills in 10 minutes, I didn't feel the need to do a 4th test run. Now for single target, it really depends if the target can stack procs past 4. Targets like Acolytes that can only get 4 procs of each element, this would easily be D tier. D for diarrhea. Other Salt, go ahead and cue the diarrhea sound effect. But normal heavy targets that can have elements applied normally, this weapon can easily stack hundreds of heat procs quickly and chunk down enemies. And so for single target damage versus normal heavy units, I'll give it A tier. And finally, ease of use. S tier is for weapons you could play blindfolded while pressing your keys with your butt cheeks and still get a lot of kills. Now, while this weapon is easy to use, it's not that easy. It at least requires adolescent chimpanzee level inputs to get your main beam on target. So we'll give it A tier for ease of use. Well, that's my take. Tell me what you guys think if you think differently. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. All right, bye.